Thank you for having me. I'm convinced in the few hours I've been here that I'm very fortunate to be in the ECP because I don't think I'm employable here. You people are too good. This is a good gig. Wow. If I'm being recorded, I better be careful. But the main reason I am here is we're not getting out about enough and let people knowing what we're doing. We aren't the keeper of all the good ideas, and we need more good people to help us point out gaps and weaknesses, and so we're interested in collaborating formally or informally. So my goal here is to get through my slides, not to communicate or answer questions. No, the goal is to really, I'm going to tee up a lot of things. I'm going to move fast because I just want you to get an idea of the breadth of the project, but do interrupt me. But I can give you a lot more information later about the people you can connect with. You can connect with me or through Amitava. So this is a somewhat standard overview, but I am going to do a little bit of a selfish digression about myself because I talked to some of you folks and there's some connections. So I've been building applications my whole career, and I'm not 70 as I look, I'm 57, but I do take senior discounts when they're offered to me. Don't tell. But I've built applications my whole career. And I'm a nuclear engineer by training, but I actually studied fusion for my dissertation, and collisional fusion, ICF, not plasma. So I'm more of a trained physicist, I believe anyway, because I spent most of my time in the physics department. Not that I'm going to go through all these codes, but there's not really much of a common theme here, other than it ended up being a lot of more CFD-based work. Started in collisional plasmas and then went down the CFD path. And CFD is not a solved problem. We're not slope forehead Neanderthals, but there's a lot of interesting work going on. So this gives you an idea of some of my background, and Amitava was referring to this experience building Vera and others that I can't name. But I've done a lot of work in a lot of different areas, and it looks like I kind of helicopter in and then move on. But these are kind of 5 to 7 year gigs, and it's one sort of the nice thing about DOE labs is, there's such an eclectic mix of people and cultures and disciplines that you really can do that. And I see that here, where every 3 or 4 years, and I'm not a careerist, I don't plan my next move, but always another opportunity has arose for me. And I'm making a lab tour. I've been at 3 different labs, but I've been in the lab system for 35 years, and it's really been a great experience. This looks to be something really exciting, so you people should feel lucky and blessed. This was me before I started ECP. 3rd grade, I think I was crying before that picture. I don't know what was wrong with me. So this took me like a day to construct back in 1985 at Los Alamos, but this was right out of my dissertation. The selfish sort of plug here is I worked with Jerry Brackbill on a new particle and cell method that was taking classical PIC that Frank Harlow invented for fluids and kind of reinventing it, modernizing it. It's now called, it was called FLIP. So I worked with him on this kind of initial implementation. And it was really driven by collisional plasmas, but for the most part, it was a CFD code with electron-ion energies. So this is just, a shameless plug that I'm not totally removed from things, or at least I wasn't back then. This is pre-AMR days. We were using adaptive grids that we thought were just the end-all and send-all. And talking to Leslie, I think the Bell-Colella paper came out in the middle of my work, and I thought, this is not going to work, it's too hard. But AMR, the way that was defined then, is really the way to go these days. You can see what I was doing in the adaptive grid. Here, the grid connectivity was not changing, but being able to move the grid. So I was ray tracing ion beams into plasmas and studying only in a planar geometry ICF target designs. A lot of fun. Worked on a Cray XMP that was about 400 megaflops back then and 32 megabytes. And I thought I died and gone to heaven. So you people are pretty lucky. We are lucky. A lot of people don't, I put this in, and Amitava's seen this, but Frank Harlow is a dear friend of mine. I worked 3 doors down from him for 10 years, and he died May 2016. Right before he died, he wrote a really interesting book. It's on Amazon. So he was a really Renaissance man. He not only invented PIC and a lot of the fundamental shock physics algorithms in the 40s and 50s, but he was an expert in pottery, and I'll call it dinosaurs, but basically there are certain classes. So he wrote a lot of books in a lot of different areas and was a real mentor for me. In particular, there's plasma PIC people here, and this is a little bit on the PIC history. Frank invented it for shock physics and fluids, really driven by the weapons program, frankly. And it was a fortuitous move into plasmas, not something Frank was really involved with, but you can see kind of a group of people at Los Alamos at the time moved it into to plasmas. And so in the ECP, we have some fundamental PIC efforts. And then, as I mentioned, my thesis advisor, Jerry Brackville, actually he wrote Stellarator code too, Matava, and did some of the first sort of fundamental divergence-free MHD work. And I worked with Jerry on FLIP, and then he worked with some colleagues on a method called NPM, which is a variant of FLIP for materials. So for structurals. So where am I going with this? Well, if you have kids that watch Frozen, this is using NPM. Let's see if can I show. Joey Turan, Joseph. It goes by Joey, and I'm having the spinning ball of death. Wow. I don't know if I can. Okay. Well. Anyway, we've been collaborating with Joseph Turan. He's a student of Ron Fedke and now works right by Osher at UCLA. Took this method, NPM, implemented it, and has really sold it to Hollywood. That's not a, wow, why we lost it. We're actually collaborating with Joseph on taking this technique and trying to see if we can understand how we can use NPM for 3D printing. And if you look at it, you see the particles. Okay, so this is a material point method, structured mesh. So the mesh isn't moving. You're modeling all the solids, the fluids, etc., with particles. And if you know anything about the 3D printing, this is I think a perfect match for modeling, whether it's powder bed based 3D printing. We have a 3D printing project in the Exascale computing program. Because most people don't know, but printing 3D alloys high spec for defense aerospace, you reject about 80% of the parts. So we don't understand how to do that well enough to really churn out parts for that area. And so we're building actually a tool to simulate the process so we can better understand it, design better, help design better printers. Anyway, most of your animated outfits, whether it's DreamWorks, Pixar, ILM, or Weta, who's hiring everybody away, hiring good mathematicians down in New Zealand, use these particle-based methods, and they're science-based, so it's not fake stuff anymore. So, if you're looking for other employment, I think there's a possibility. All right, enough of a segue. Exascale Computing Project. It's a large project, and we're actually in the Department of Energy on the watch list, and you're on the watch list for one of three reasons or more. You're big, you're interesting, or you're in trouble. And I think we're big and interesting. And so we are watched pretty closely, for better or worse, by the Department of Energy. And this is a project with a capital P, and I'll kind of give you the speeds and feeds on this. So as Amitava mentioned, in 2016-15, when Secretary Moniz was running the Department of Energy, he came up with, and I really like this model, there's 5 or 6 crosscuts across the Department of Energy that really crosscut all the programs. One was simulation. And what came out of that is something called an initiative, the Exascale Computing Initiative. I just view it as a computing initiative, but the DOE committed to large investments in what's known as the ECI in 2016. It came into the budget in 16. And we are, the Exascale Computing Project, a piece of this pie. We're probably, we're an equal size to this piece. So we're building apps, the software stack, and funding vendors to develop hardware that is cognizant of our requirements. There are 3 first mover exascale systems that are funded here, and if you sum these together, this is about $4 billion itself over 7 years, from 16 to 23. And then some, and I apologize for acronym hell here, but some other program offices are funding some separate applications. But we're not deploying systems, but we're deploying essentially the App Store for the nation, the iOS, and the hardware R&D, if you want to think about it that way. These are the names of systems, and these are facilities: Argonne, Aurora, Oak Ridge, Frontier, Livermore, El Capitan, and I'm naming national labs. There are 17 national labs, so the first 3 mover exascale systems are what we're targeting in ECP to really show what applications can do. So we're really building apps that are going to be ready. Day one, the exascale systems roll in, and they're going to target problems of national interest. What we call capable is basically useful, usable, useful, and affordable. Usable means it's a software stack that's cognizant of our apps. Useful means our apps are ready to go to tackle problems, and affordable. If you look at kind of hardware roadmaps, and we've been talking exascale, at least in the DOE, for too darn long, frankly, since 07, 08, and the projections where an exascale system would consume a couple hundred megawatts of power. And so that, you know, typical utility bills are kind of $1 million per megawatt year, and so you can't afford $100 million per year utility budget. As a nuclear engineer, you could bury a reactor out back, and I think you'd be fine, but that's not up to me. Nevertheless, what we're looking at for exascale systems, because of the hardware R&D, is kind of 20 to 30 megawatts, and that now becomes still expensive, but more affordable. So the point is, capable is useful, usable, and affordable. I don't think to this group I have to sort of motivate the national interest. There's economic aspects, science discovery aspects, national security. Hopefully, I don't have to make the case with this group. Fortunately, on the Hill, it's a bipartisan supported effort, and we're grateful for that. And I don't think it should be anyone. Both sides of the aisle strongly support this effort. So we're fortunate to, as long as we deliver, I think our future. And again, we're targeting to end as a formal project in 2023, and we can talk about what post ECP would look like. But I feel like right now we're not quite halfway through the project, and we're really enjoying support from our DOE sponsors as well as the Hill. One notional way to think about it, you look at the trajectory, of at least we like to think that we're really kind of really injecting an uplift in terms of the technology, both the applications, the software stack, and the hardware, and that left to sort of current investments, we would get there, but much later and with much less capability. And so we can talk about return on investment. If you get into dollars and numbers, that gets a little dicey when you're talking about science. So I don't want to go to quantitative ROIs, but I think that if you look at this, and as Amitabh mentioned, it's sort of it's order $1.7 billion over 7 years. We think this uplift is going to put the DOE mission and ideally the nation on a really good trajectory post ECP. By the numbers, 7 years, $1.7 billion. Traditionally or historically, 6 of the 17 DOE national labs, and they're listed here, have been involved heavily in computational and HPC related research, and that includes deploying large systems, and they have their own data centers. So the Department of Energy for this project looked at these 6 labs and said, we want personnel from these 6 labs to run this project. So it's not that we don't talk to our DOE sponsors almost every day. In fact, I have a 4 o'clock phone call with them. But they're, we like this model in that they empower DOE contractors, staff like me, to lead and execute the project and hold us accountable. And we like this model. And so actually the staff from the 6 labs are leading this effort. 4 focus areas, and as Amitabh mentioned, there's about 100 R&D teams and over 1,000 researchers. So it is a large effort with lots of moving parts that I cannot keep up with myself, but I've got a great team. And I want to try to name some names so you can just sort of know who to talk to other than me. Amitabh mentioned the National Strategic Computing Initiative. Even though it's not talked about much in the Trump administration, it's still an active presidential initiative. We're fortunate because we really like it. It's an all-of-government approach. If you Google NSCI strategic plan, you can find it. There's a nice PDF, maybe only 20 pages. It's pretty digestible. In terms of what it says DOE should be a lead federal agency for executing on this initiative and stand up a project. And other agencies like DOD and NSF were called out as sort of partner agencies. For us, there's a lot of agencies. Again, this is a lot of acronyms named in the document. We are asked to essentially address these issues, and these issues can be mapped to, at a high level, applications that address the challenges and requirements of each of these areas. So this is really, kind of the high-level requirements for this project, okay? And so there was an initiative is not a bill with funds, but what followed is all the agencies, especially the DOE, laid out some, in their budget bills, some funds, and essentially a year later stood up what's known as the Exascale Computing Project. This is a kind of an eye chart, but it's a list of all the systems that we as a project are focused on. And it's essentially all the systems at the 6 labs that I mentioned. And there's lots of names here and vendors listed. The numbers in parentheses are the top 500 ranking. And we could argue whether HPL, high performance LINPACK, is a reasonable metric. I would say it's one of many, but the top 500 rankings that last came out in last November, show that 8 of the top 24 systems are here and 5 of the top 10. Most recently, the Summit system at Oak Ridge and the Sierra system at Livermore are 1 and 2. And for ECP, the first mover systems, Aurora, Frontier, and El Capitan, are where we're going to prove our worth and show that our applications are ready to tackle challenge problems and our software stack is ready and able. So as a project, we have formal metrics that we're going to have to meet when these systems show up. Point is that we're not waiting till they show up. We're doing a lot of work on these systems here. And in the interest of time, I'm gonna move a little bit quicker here. But the Summit system, here are the speeds and feeds. It is a way cool system. Yes, I'm at Oak Ridge, but I'm going to say that anyway. It really has a nice, very balanced node, two IBM Power 9s and 6 Voltas. It really has a nice coherent memory set. It's probably one weak link is the interconnect, and I would say most of the systems now, the interconnect needs to be beefed up. But this system just went through acceptance. It is now in a early science period. Amitava leads a project that has access to it. If you are interested in access to Summit, it's possible. So you can either through Amitava or directly with me. I can put you in contact with folks that can give you give you the opportunity to get on. It is a lightweight proposal-driven process, at least for discretionary allocations. But this organization might be very interested. The real heart of this thing is the Voltas GPUs, and there's 27,000 of these guys on Summit, which is just incredible. And let's see, I don't have it here, but the machine that I really enjoyed in Los Alamos was the connection machine CM5, and this guy in that one little processor is much more than a CM5. You can see the speeds and feeds. You're talking 7.5 64-bit floating point, 15, 32, and 120, 16. This was a surprise for us when working with NVIDIA. This wasn't in our contract requirements. They came out with a Volta chip. Not that they kept it from us, but they said, oh, by the way, we have a 4x4 tensor operation, D equals AB plus T, that really goes lightning fast at 16-bit. And we're like, wow, okay. And it's really driven by AI machine learning market. That's not, frankly, the DOE, a lot of the DOE researchers, some people notwithstanding, are a little behind industry in this area. So most of our traditional, deterministic MonSim apps I haven't even thought about 16. I've just sort of defaulted to 64 float or 64 real, and so we've gotten lazy. Now we don't need 64-bit, and I'll look at Amitava, especially in particles. I don't think we need 64-bit for positions, as an example. So the point is what we're doing a lot of is really figuring out how to cheat, how to compress our data down to 16, and use this for traditional MonSim apps, in addition to obviously machine learning. And I'll point out that Jack Donguera has a nice piece of work that showed for an LU decomposition, he could get 64-bit precision, meaning the answer came out as a 64-bit precise number by using 16. And he used mixed precision and he iterated. He actually used GMRes to do LU, which seems like a bastardization, but he got 4x the floating point peak, or 30 teraflops, 64-bit precision by using mixed precision. That's the kind of stuff that we never would have dreamed of doing something like that 10 years ago. So one of the things we're looking at is we want our apps to be able to roll in there and go, okay, I've seen this before. This is a Volta. It's got tensor 4x4 16-bit. I know how to use this. So our apps you really need to adapt to the hardware. I don't see there different hardware or software platforms for AI versus deterministic apps. Our apps need to be able to just use whatever's there well. That's one of the goals here, is getting our apps ready. So we're broken up into an application development area, software technology, hardware, and integration. My background is as an application developer, so of course I'm going to say more about that area, but the software stack is very important. And in particular, yes, I put an org chart up. It's complicated, but I wanted to point out the key people in the project who are leading application development. Andrew Siegel, Eric Drager, and I'll leave these slides behind. Feel free to contact these folks directly or through me or Amitabha. Mike Aru, Jonathan Carter, software technology, hardware integration, Terry Quinn, and Susan Coughlin. We have a whole other group of folks that help us. We do have a board of directors. That's our 6 laboratory directors. So in that sense, we're kind of like a small company. And we did this in the Castle endeavor that Amitabha mentioned before. So we sort of execute like not an autonomous company, but we execute somewhat like a company. And the board of directors assesses my performance, gives us input on strategy, etc. So and these are, not everybody's white-haired like me, but these are senior people that have been around the block. And that doesn't mean that the early career people couldn't do this, but we were able to get kind of leaders in their own areas. If you haven't heard of these names, then I can help you get in contact with these folks. Hopefully you have. Underneath, we are a project, and that we have a work breakdown structure. How many people know what that is? Okay, good. Okay. I'm going to say if you do, maybe that's a problem if you're doing science, but I just put this in because these are key leaders who are still down in the technical weeds, and each one of them is managing 5 to 10 projects. So we have 103, to be exact, R&D projects, and each one of these folks, and I've got last names listed only, is leading. I prefer to say leading rather than managing. Is leading 5 to 10 projects, and the PIs themselves are doing the work, but we have a hierarchy from the teams executing the work to what we call these level 3 folks, level 2, and then myself. The point is these are really great people to touch base with as well, and they're really down in the trenches with the leads. So I'm going to take you now through each area, and I'm going to try to hit some examples that are based on kind of what I've heard today and what I know about. So these are our application areas. They're really kind of in 6 pillars, really driven by the NSCI strategic plan. What ECP did is we wrote a formal requirements doc that DOE signed off on. It says, we're going to do, here's the what's of what we're going to do, the functional requirements, how we do it and how well we do it. We negotiate it later. Each one of these, so what you see is not the project title or the PI, but the problem they're going after. And so each one of these was negotiated with program offices in the Department of Energy. And so for the most part, all of these applications are driven by certain DOE offices. And there is some DOE mission space that overlaps or is complementary with NSF, for example. So you'll see, you see fundamental science here. The Basic Energy Sciences Program Offices funds a lot of fundamental science. So that's an office that we support here. We have one really unique application that's jointly funded with NIH, and that's healthcare. So it's basically the cancer moonshot work, and it's really our main sort of card-carrying machine learning project that is jointly funded by the NIH. And so this is a real exciting effort that I won't say much about, but it's really emitting an environment that I think is going to be useful outside of machine learning for cancer. So I'm going to zip through these. I'm not going to speak to all of them, but I think it's important to kind of leave behind what all the applications are. So each application has a challenge problem that they're going after. And we call it a challenge problem as opposed to a grand challenge problem. You can blame me because the grand challenge always seems like we never get there. So I took the grand out. So these are challenge problems. And challenge problems kind of at a high level have sort of the following definition. Their solution isn't minimal in part with mod, SIM, or AI. Okay? Some problems aren't. Their solution, the problem as posed, is intractable on current systems. It needs an exascale resource, whether it's the compute power, the memory, the throughput, and it's a key strategic problem that a program office currently has on their plate. So we're going after problems that are kind of top 3 strategic priorities in various program offices, intractable on today's systems as posed, and are likely to have solutions that will in part address the problem. We're not signing up to solve these problems, meaning I hope we will some, but as a project with specific metrics, we're signing up to have the technology that will realistically address the problem. In blue is the impact if we solve it. Okay, and this gets into, you know, when we talk to folks on the Hill or DOE sponsors, you know, why are we doing this problem? Why do we care? And so some of it gets into dollars and cents, like I noted earlier. Some of it does not. But there are 25 of these projects. Okay, there are 3 that are national security applications in support of our stockpile. 1 that's the NIH, and then 21 that hit the rest of the DOE program space. And so there are 10 program offices that we're targeting in the Department of Energy, which is why we have such a broad portfolio. So if you see one that you want to meet to discuss, I'm happy to do it. Otherwise, I've chosen a few examples. Okay. Being a trained nuclear engineer, I had to talk about SMRs. Okay. The thing I wanted to point out here is we've seen a Back to the Future evolution of the algorithms. Monte Carlo is embarrassingly parallel, so I independently follow each particle is independent, perfect for parallel compute, right? Well, no, on GPUs it really sucks, frankly. So you have very history-dependent tracks. I may have one particle that goes through 2 collisions, then it is absorbed or fission, and another would go through 200. So if I throw them all in the GPU, then we're waiting on that last particle. Okay, so we don't want to go history-dependent. We want to go event. We want to go event-based. Now I want to bend all the fissioned neutrons together. I want to bend all the scattered, all the absorbed. When you do that, you get tremendous GPU utilization. This and that's shown here. Basically, being able to go event-based, you get tremendous GPU occupancy, and you can check all this. Okay. Going back, had this discussion with Leslie Greengard about cross sections. They're using a windowed multipole method to compute these god-awful cross sections. Okay. So a fission cross-section down in the energies when a neutron will be absorbed and cause a fission event, it just bounces up and down because of the shells in the nucleus. And so you've got to get this right. Traditionally, you have these large data sets, these neutron cross-section data sets. You have to schlep in on node, and you got to access it. This team has said we're not going to use the data. We have flops for free. We're going to use a multipole method to actually compute the cross-sections on the fly, and it's worked very well. So the combination of these 2 things have given this application already 40x speed up, basically about a factor of 6 or 7 over hardware. So we expect in the Exascale project most of our performance gains are going to be algorithmically. Okay, we want to take advantage of the hardware, but here's some new algorithms that map well to the hardware. So that's a great story. And again, I'll try to list the PIs where I can. Again, fossil fuel combustion, clean fossil fuel combustion, biofuel catalyst design. I should at least call out the titles here. Materials for extreme environments. This is accelerated MD. Lots of really cool algorithmic work here. This will admit, I think, an application environment, a fairly generic accelerated MD environment that could be used in biology and a lot of other areas as well. I mentioned the additive manufacturing project. We're not going to have an Exascale system sit by a 3D printer and tell it how to work, but we can develop a fundamental understanding, potentially have surrogate models, such as ultimately a trained neural net to drive the printer real time. If you look at the 3D printing technology, I think we're kind of in generation 1. They're pretty crude. The software on them is pretty crude, and we anticipate really being able to impact the design of the printers as well as the actual process itself. I know that you have a quantum effort here in the Institute. We have a quantum Monte Carlo effort that's really going after electronic sensing, storing. Nickel oxide is their canonical problem. Most QMC, so quantum Monte Carlo for structure and its materials or chemistry or catalysts is really considered the gold standard answer if you have enough particles and enough time. Currently, you see 50 to 100 atoms being done. They're targeting 1,024 atoms and 12,000 electrons, and that's getting to a size now where you can start to do design with it. So that's an important one too that I needed to mention. We have some non-traditional applications. The power grid itself is an Exascale problem. If you put the 3 interconnects in the United States together, you have tens of thousands of generation points and hundreds of thousands of transmission and distribution points. So you have mixed integer programming here for optimization. You've got the attack surface now for vulnerability because of smart devices being large. So it's an exascale problem, not just to do better planning, but to understand reliability and vulnerability. And this is a non-traditional one in that you've got agent-based simulations, discrete event simulations, coupled with more classical deterministic simulations. So a common theme is for these apps is we're bringing together multiple codes, if you will, into one environment and coupling them to build a better multi-physics. Smart city dynamics is the same way. Here you've got urban weather, you've got a CFD application, you've got a building model for energy flow in and out of a building. You've got cellular automata-based traffic flow, and you've got agent-based communication and movement. So urban planning is another new area. Risk assessment, seismic wave propagation, classical internal combustion engine. Yes, we're still going to have combustion engines around for a while. They're also focused on land-based turbines, and there's a lot of land. GE puts out land-based turbines now that are 250 to 500 megawatts. So essentially, a huge jet engine bolted sideways on the ground is the way I think of it. So they're looking at that as well. We've got an Earth system climate model. Mark Taylor runs that project. Just a really sharp person. All these PIs are. Chemistry for catalyst design. Metagenomics, and this certainly has application for human biology, but in this case, look at microbiomes in the environment. This is very much a graph-based metagenomic assembly. This comes out of Berkeley, and they're really beating a lot of the commercial assemblers out there. And the point is not to beat the point is not to beat the commercial endeavors, but to make sure that we can come up with new ways of doing things and push the technology out. A lot of this stuff, as much as we can, we're open sourcing. Cosmology, figured this would be of interest here. Salmon Abib, I got a slide on that. QCD, nuclear physics, fundamental nuclear force here, quark propagators and lattice gauge, and plasma wake field. So I thought I'd, for the cosmology and the wake field, give you some examples. So Salman Abib at Argonne is the PI here, and as a person that's kind of a common theme for me, it's been CFD. He's got some interesting models for his gas dynamics. He's using a new particle-based, SPH-based algorithm for his gas dynamics. And for the for the folks here that are trained in this field, certainly some fundamental questions he's going to address. Evolving the universe into what we see now. So this is kind of the high level goals. This is pretty detailed, but I thought I would go ahead and leave this behind because for each one of these projects, they have a specific challenge problem they're going after. They're bringing in specific applications, certain software technologies, and apologies if you don't know what these are. Maybe it doesn't matter, but we've done a sort of careful mapping what the applications are and what they need in terms of a software stack. What the risks are. And within ECP, we are more projectized, and as Amitava can tell you, because he leads the project. So year by year, we're asking for milestones, if you will. And a milestone for us is I've got a software release, or I've demonstrated a new capability, or I'm showing that I'm getting good performance, those sorts of things. And they're embodied in reports, memos, and releases. In this case, he's bringing together two codes, Hack, which is his code, and Ann Almgren at Berkeley is using a mesh-based AMR embodied code known as NIX. So again, this is just an example of kind of the charter of one particular project. So I want to be sure and mention that. Another one is a Wakefield accelerator, which is a way cool concept. It's being looked at as really a key concept for next generation, low cost, high intensity accelerators for industry, for medicine. As an example, in this case, you're hitting a plasma with either an electron beam or another laser and building up this wake field, and again emitting photons at a kind of dial a wavelength, much like free electron lasers. This is Jean-Luc Vey at Berkeley, and this is more kind of fundamental, what I call more classical PIC. His code is called Warp, and he's now calls it WarpX, and he has brought AMR into this code base. done a lot of work in making sure that his electrostatic, electromagnetic solves on the various patch levels work well. So this is one that I thought would map to some interest here that I wanted to call out. He's going after kind of a terawatt intensity design. So a number of program offices in the DOE are interested in this. I'd be remiss to not mention Amitabha. He leads this project. Basically whole device modeling of magnetically confined fusion plasmas. And you know, you can see that ITER is a major driver for this. As Amitabha mentioned, that's a heavy investment in the DOE is the ITER program. But we also want to see this environment be able to handle other geometries and other devices. So we don't want to invest into just a tokamak code. We want to invest in a magnetically confined environment. And so, you know, the drivers here are not just ITER, but other devices, you know, stellarators and tokamaks. And you can see the kinds of challenge problems that there are more here than what he's tackling. But these are kind of the drivers for going after this. Obviously, with ITER, we want to be able to be ready to get the most out of ITER, to be able to operationally help it real time, or help kind of plan out the next series of experiments. We don't want to see things like disruptions happen. We want to be able to understand that whole surface and stay away from it. And so, you know, Amitabha has his hands full with this project. So on days that he's here, you should probably leave him alone so that he can make sure he's still still executing. And one of the neat things about this project, and you know, I can claim that I kind of helped to drive the vision, which is let's bring multiple codes together. Let's create a next generation or present environment where we have multiple codes interoperate. In this case, you've got a couple of gyrokinetic codes. One is a grid-based continuum code known as GENE, and the other one is a particle and cell code using full F and delta F known as XGC, and they both have their merits in certain parts. So GENE for the center and XGC for the edge. So we want to couple these two codes together and let them do what they're best at doing. So coupling kinetics or stochastic particle and cell with continuum required some fundamental mathematics and algorithm work. And so ECP doesn't, you know, we're not a computer science exercise. That's hard enough, but each application has its own development plan. It's a combination of better and new and enhanced physics models, new and enhanced algorithms, software redesign, and computer science down at the low level. So every project has a unique plan, and Amitabha's in particular had a really tough sort of how do we couple these two codes together hurdle to get over, and he's done that. And I think set the standard for sort of how to go after bringing these two capabilities together. And again, this is his original challenge problem or quad chart, and you know, it's old Amitabha, so I don't think it's up to date. But you know, again, a typical scenario for our apps is, you know, we like the idea of building environments that bring multiple codes together, and I think an environment from in my definition would be common build, maybe common input-output, common testing, interoperable. And we've seen this work in other domains, and so you know, we like what's going on in this project. Another one we have, and a lot of these projects have Exa something as a title. This is Exa star. Okay, so this is an astrophysics effort, and if folks here aren't aware of this project, that's one reason I wanted to bring it up. But if you are, then I encourage you to, if you're not engaged, to engage with Dan Kaysen. He's the PI. So really, the Office of Nuclear Physics in DOE was very interested in supernova. But when we talked to them, they felt like neutron star mergers really could be a sort of a precursor to gravitational waves. They thought we could study that signature. It turns out Dan played a key role in understanding that signature in the recent sighting, and was able to really determine the light change that they observed. In this case, what we said to these folks, because they wanted to bring 4 or 5 codes together, and I said I'd like you to build one environment that really allows these codes to interoperate and use kind of the best features of each one. In this case, you have Flash, which is an AMR-based code. You have Castro, Chimera, and Sedona. And for the astrophysicists here, you may be aware of these codes, but I told them, I said, we can't fund 4 astrophysics projects. We can fund 1, so figure out how to work together. So they named their framework Clash, which I thought was appropriate. And so they are coming together. And I think the end game here is to not have one code engulf the other, but let's work together and let's kind of understand how we should interoperate, whether one code should do one thing and the other code should do another. Basically, depending on the problem, they now have multiple applications within one environment. So I think this works well. So each one of these teams, I should mention, has been working now for a little over 2 years, about 2 years and 3 months. And so we're starting to see some good progress. So I'm not showing you as many results. I'm showing you kind of more plans. This is the application for cancer research. And one of the interesting things here is led by Rick Stevens at Argonne, is their environment's called CANDLE, Cancer Distributed Learning Environment. But essentially it's an environment that is somewhat agnostic to the application. So I see it being more useful for machine learning studies in general. And so it's proving its worth now in cancer. And it's basically they have sort of 3 pilots here, they call them, and they're using a combination of supervised, semi-supervised, and unsupervised machine learning, mostly building on TensorFlow. But I think they're finding that there are some things that industry framework can't do like they'd like, and so they'll probably probably not either, but it'd be both augmenting the TensorFlow code base as well as building some of their own capabilities. So there's a lot more we could say about that, but it's kind of, we're doing more than dabbling in machine learning, but we are, I do see that moving forward a little bit more deeper and broader. We're also doing experimental analysis. So this is event-based simulation where we got light sources generating images that we want to analyze real time, and ultimately we'd like to computationally steer the experiment. So this is another new application to really trying to marry fundamental simulation, in this case tomographic reconstruction and image, understanding images with the experimental facility itself. Berkeley calls it a super facility, and I think that's kind of an apt term. This is focused on the LCLS2, which is a free electron laser at SLAC. I want to say a little bit about our view of co-design. I want to talk a little about the software stack. So co-design is really the give and take of requirements going back and forth, clear from the applications down to the hardware. And these particular projects I want to mention here are more software-based co-design, where what we've done, and this is based on Phil Colella at Berkeley came out, I want to say it was the late 80s, maybe it's early 90s, where he published a nice paper that basically said most of the deterministic applications out there today use 7, he called them 7 dwarfs. We now call them 7 motifs, which is a better term, but use 7 kind of classical motifs. Most applications can be mapped into one or more of these motifs: Monte Carlo particles, sparse linear, dense linear, spectral, unstructured grid, structured grid. Those are what we call kind of the classical motifs. The other 6 was Berkeley came out about 5 years later and said, well, if we look at AI and data analytics, there's some other motifs that we need to consider. So what we did in ECP is we analyzed the motifs that are being used by our 25 applications. And so those are the green boxes. And we said, well, we really should go after those motifs. In other words, let me use particles as an example. We really should study and understand how do we best push particles, map particles to mesh to particles well on this hardware. And can we generate components, libraries, and techniques and capabilities that applications can use, rather than having each application doing its own vertical co-design. Let's see if we can develop some cross-cut technologies that can be leveraged across multiple apps. It's a heavy lift because applications are pretty emotionally attached to the way they do things. I know, because that was certainly me. But also it's really hard at times to disentangle the motif from the details of the physics. So it requires thinking about the application design as well for this technology to be really ingested. None of this is plug and play, but these efforts have been up and running now for like I said, a little over 2 years, and we're really starting to see fruits of their labor. So there are 6 co-design centers. This proxy applications is a different effort that's really useful in working with vendors. But you can see, kind of running down through, we have one that's really not a classical motif the way Phil Colella talked about it, but looking at workflow, and it's known as CODAR. And so this is online data analysis and reduction. So for a lot of our workflows, we're seeing the traditional workflow of doing the big simulation, dumping the data, reading it back in, analyzing it, just doesn't work. We have too much data, and often the real-time analytics actually actively acts back on the application, changing a model choice or an algorithm choice. You really want to do real-time data analytics. So you have to reduce the data and analyze it, and then act back on the application. So this team led by Ian Foster-Argonne is looking at essentially an environment with certain components to be able to do that for our applications. I mentioned particle-based Kothe. Their library is called Cabana. And they've got a really nice library for, at least on GPUs, really how to make particles scream. So the Cabana library is an example. We, certainly, I think a minimal level of success in the co-design center is just to have a set of best practices, and here's what you should do. But ideally, you'd want to go further to, here's a software component that does that, and to see our applications essentially use it. And so I think the Cabana library has that possibility for particle-based codes. We have an AMRX center. John Bell at Berkeley is leading that. We have a center on PDE-based discretization on unstructured meshes. This is for structured meshes. Have a graph analytics center, and one we just stood up about 4 months ago on machine learning. Everybody likes EXA. That was not a constraint from my point of view, but everybody likes that EX, so that's why you see it everywhere. Proxy apps is basically, folks probably know what that is. So if you take a 1,000,000-line code and you hand it to a vendor, Cray, say make this thing scream, well, maybe you can't give it to them because it's proprietary or it's data sensitive. So proxy apps are basically trying to extract in a few thousand lines key kernels that we want to really see go scream, and we work with vendors on that. So often in contractual arrangements with vendors, we'll ask that this proxy app has to run this fast, and it's meant to be a proxy for the larger application. And that's a slippery slope, because once you pare down to a few 100,000 lines, it's often hard to really replicate the app. So you need to do both. But when vendors come and say to ECP, what are your apps? We often say, well, start here. And there's a website where you can kind of see what's out there, and they're meant to mimic some of our key kernels and some of our key motifs. So I'll say a little bit about C. Zonio Kothe at Livermore is leading this, and he's already releasing his technology. And again, this is for finite element-based PDE discretization, and a lot of finite element-based operations, but also unstructured mesh operations. We have a lot of unstructured mesh applications. So here's an example of the various applications that he's going to be able to hit with C. So one sort of common theme here is these tend to be fluid dynamics and fluid mechanics sort of applications. And they're all over the map in terms of compressible, low Mach number, compressible shock physics to heat transfer, phase change. The idea here is to develop a kind of a higher level next generation component library, LibC he calls it, that these codes can use. And this is a contact sport. They're not going to ingest this stuff and swallow this stuff whole. You have to work intimately with the team, understand their requirements. It's a give and take. So in that sense, it's co-design really between the co-design center and the apps, because a lot of the apps, folks, myself included, sometimes view, or maybe all the time view, bringing these external libraries in as risk. I can't control what you guys do. You may leave tomorrow. This library may get old or be deprecated. So we have to make sure that these technologies evolve as well. The other good example is the AMX Co-Design Center, and here it's just not adaptive mesh refinement, but if you have a series of AMR patches, how do you push particles across the patches? How do you handle embedded boundaries? How do you do your solvers? So this center is really looking at all these things, okay? Because often it's just not patches I want to use. I want to do other stuff as well. And John and his team have, they're currently targeting 5 applications, and they've all been integrated in. John had a little bit easier job, just a little bit, because some of these were already using his predecessor library known as BoxLib. But some of these codes, let's see, accelerator code and the multi-phase hadn't had any exposure to AMR-based technologies. And so you can see, he's sort of marking who needs particles, who needs ODEs for chemistry, say locally, who's going to use my linear solver and my embedded boundary. So it's not just a motif. It's usually a collection of motifs, and he can, you can see the code names up here. I mentioned the Code Center, good workflow activity. I think in interest of time, I'll just skip it, but I just wanted to call it out as an example. And here's our new, again, Exa something, right? Exa Learn. Frank Alexander of Brookhaven is leading this. And you can see this one has a little more of an R component, research component. A lot of some of our projects are more D, development, but you can see some of the things that they're looking at. And you can see this is our requirement, meaning they need to tackle problems that really are driven by exascale requirements, whether it's ingesting the data or the compute. Doesn't replicate anything already out there. That's a waste of time. Try to bring in the physics knowledge where you can. Want to understand, just like the DARPA AIX program of explainable AI, that's important for us too. If we're going to use these technologies to make important decisions, just where is the cliff between right and wrong, and is it understandable? So I would say to the experts in here that these are kind of no-brainer requirements. Nevertheless, they're worth stating. Frank just gave a nice presentation last week on where his project is. It's only 4 months old, but I just wanted to call attention. They're just up and running, so it's a good chance to interface with them. And this brings in folks from 8 labs, but I see them expanding to bring in more university role as well. So it's a good opportunity now, and I think, to interface with Frank. So we're going to get our stuff out there. There's a nice document that summarizes details on 22 of the projects and 7 co-design centers that's been written. We're going to try to get a public version out next month. We will redact some of the project stuff, dollars and milestones, and Andrew Siegel and his team are going to get this out next month. So I wanted to call attention to that. Here's the challenges as Andrew sees them from the application point of view, and they're kind of in priority order. So accelerator-based architectures, you can think of a node now and a node in the future is going to be heterogeneous. You're going to have hardware that's tuned more to accelerate certain operations. Right now, you might think it's floating point, and in the case of NVIDIA, that's certainly true, but it could be accelerating other operations. So our codes need to be designed in a way that they can be flexible enough to adapt to heterogeneous architecture. So that's heterogeneous compute and heterogeneous memory. So we've got some work that's going on in our software stack to abstract some of this complexity away from the applications that don't want to get into those details, and there's good reason not to. So I want to say a little bit about software. So we have our software technology area led by Mike Carew, and it's broken up into these kind of 5 areas. One of the things on the far right we're really committed to doing is to package up our latest software technologies into SDKs, software development kits, and get them out there. We've already gone through 2 releases, so I want to make sure you guys know that that's out there. This is one way to look at the stack. Again, programming models, runtimes, math libs, and data viz dev tools. There are probably other ways to look at it as well, but just sort of pictorially to give you an idea of what we're doing with the scope. Mike has already done an assessment of his portfolio last year, and the document's out there. This is our website. It's a nice tour de force. It really it's not claiming to solve all the problems. It's just covering the scope of what ECP is doing in software technology. And in particular, a key delivery strategy are these SDKs. And he's currently updating this document. I think in February there'll be another rev. So that's out on our website. So a lot of the software technology products, so in software technology to us is below the applications down to not the OS per se, but kind of down to right above the OS. Relative to 10 years ago when we were doing kernel mods in the OS, as we were worried about Linux booting up with 100,000 cores, we're past that. We may still do some small kernel mods, but for the most part, we're living above the OS. So this is just an example out of that report. In a lot of cases, ECP is uplifting, standard community libraries and capabilities that have been out there for a long time. And in many cases, too, we don't say in the DOE or in ECP own these products, but we're helping to evolve them and uplift them. So I wanted to point that out. We're not claiming that we own all these things, but this is a good list of all the products that, and I think there's 89 by last count, that products that we're funding within the SDK, ST effort. So software development kits is not a new concept. A lot of your key hardware and software vendors, Apple as an example, have SDK. So we like that idea as well. And we're agglomerating our software technology products around key thematic areas like math. Okay, so there is a math SDK that's already been released, and we plan to package these. So instead of having 89 products to ingest, now it's an SDK that's containerized and might have a dozen or more products in one. And you don't have to ingest the whole SDK, say in your app. You can still pull in single products, but it does make it attractive. Say the Math SDK has all of our solver work in one SDK. So if you're interested in trying different sparse linear solvers, dense solvers, eigensolvers, it literally is very, very easy to bring in the Math SDK and use that. Here's an example of a kind of an older version of the Math SDK. It's since evolved. This is a different application, a subsurface application, but you can see some of the community libraries that have been brought in to the Math SDK. At least in our world, your standard PETSI and trilenal solvers are there, but you've got other solvers that are all embodied within one SDK. Our first release of ECP's SDKs was November, and we've got another release out there as well. It is at e4s.io, and I forgot what the E4S stood for. Examples of sort of things we do. So in the software technology, we also have milestones. There are releases, there are demonstrations, and forgive me, but these are WBS numbers. And yes, we go down to level 4. That's where the work is really done. But you can find a lot of this online. But just to give you an example, every project ranges from a few hundred K per year to 4 or 5 million per year. Has a couple of milestones per year that we ask them to deliver on. The last element, and I know I've got a couple minutes here, hardware and integration. So we have been funding vendor hardware R&D for node-based vendor design, node-based hardware design, and system-based design, upstream of the Exascale offerings. The idea being we want to bring products in sooner, we want to bring certain products sort of down into and intersect the Exascale deployments. And so the R&D portion of the Exascale effort for hardware is in the hardware and integration area of ECP. Here are the 6 US vendors that we have been funding since 2016. And you can see the various R&D thrusts here. But in terms of the hardware, there's sort of, if you read about the Exascale challenges, you got resiliency and parallelism and power and memory as well. And so each one of these vendors is going after specific things that have been negotiated with DOE, with us, in terms of this matters for our apps, okay? This has been an important and very successful model. In the recent Exascale, so the Exascale RFP, the RFP for the Exascale systems came out earlier this past year. It was April. We now have evidence that this investment has paid off. We are seeing these technologies that we funded, rolling into what we believe will be our Exascale platforms. This is a lot of busyness, but let me just say that our facilities are production. What we call our facilities are HPC centers, and they're production centers, okay? And the last thing they want to see is some, crufty, buggy Exascale library come on their system. And so we've worked with them to develop a continuous integration framework, basically having a CI system set up to where if I'm a developer and I push out a new version, we see it, we pull it into the SDK, we push it into the facilities and do CI, continuous integration, on typically a rack that's not a production rack. And so we've worked hard the last year to work with our facilities to harden and make production quality our software. And we haven't imposed things like you need to use a new repository, we're going to let users use it on GitLab, GitHub, whatever. And so it's taken a while, but we've got a system for deployment, and we've worked hard. We're actually funding a company, Onyx Point, to address some shortcomings in GitLab that we needed to do this continuous push. So this has gotten us a long way into really ensuring that, if you're on one of our facilities and you can do module load live, or you can do module load live-ECP and get some sort of beta version of what we're doing. And so that's been important. So we're really about product delivery and and deployment. We are funding a lot of research, but in the end, our metrics and our success is based on the products that we deliver and deploy to the facilities. So you can see from a software point of view, all the products go into selected SDKs with APIs negotiated with apps. We're going to continuously push the SDKs out and do CI on the systems now, pre-Exascale as we call, ultimately going through a series of test runs and metrics on Aurora, Frontier, and El Capitan. I think I'll skip the integration piece. Sort of the bottom line, we are on track as a project, and that has a very specific meaning, as Amitabha knows. We're not halfway through, so it's good for me to be here now. Target conclusion date is June 23, so we're about 4.5 years away. And so I hope that, there's been some, again, this is very high level and not down in the weeds like I'd rather talk to you about, but I'm hoping that some of what you heard is maybe interesting, you could benefit from, and maybe more importantly for us, you could help us. There's a lot of things that we're doing that I know we could use more minds to wrap around this. We think it's really this is a very exciting project. It's kind of a once-in-a-career opportunity. We believe that we have a great set of folks, as Amitabha mentioned, probably 1,000 researchers, and we're fortunate right now to have our support from DOE and the Hill, and we hope it continues that way. We hope we continue to make progress and do a better job in reaching out to folks like you guys at the Flatiron Institute. That said, I'm a fan of the Matrix, and I think this is taking the red pill myself, and I feel like DOE's given us the opportunity to do that, and we're very excited about it. And yes, I'm old enough to have grandkids, and so I couldn't help but put this one in as well. Anyway, thanks for your time and attention. I went a little bit over.
Whirlwind tour of the ECP and a lot of information.
Yeah.
Questions for Doug?
Okay.
Pragmatically, there are only going to be a few exascale facilities, and they're going to be shared by lots of people, and the actual computing going to be done on them is not going to be exascale for the most part. So to what degree is that explicitly taken into account here as these software packages are being developed, as all the software is put into place?
Yeah.
Are these deliverables, as you described, going to be applicable to what you at the very end referred to as sort of pre-exascale systems?
Yeah, yeah.
And if so, how far down the hierarchy?
It's a good question.
Explicitly taking into account.
Yeah, it's a good question. All of our development, well, almost all, is done on laptops and single-node systems. So by design, the software and apps will run, from laptop on up. For obviously to be able to go after specific problems that require more compute and memory, you can't do that on a laptop. And also, you may not find problems with scaling or issues until you roll on those larger systems. So they help both uncover bugs and weaknesses as well as allow you to address certain problems. But we would have failed if the software stack and the apps really can't be run on the whole hierarchy. Okay.
Not just be run, but actually be usefully run lower down, providing a benefit that you wouldn't get from using other software packages. Yeah,
as an example, I mentioned the Monte Carlo. That 40X is on just a single node. Okay, so in other words, I can do a Monte Carlo calculation on my laptop now 40 times faster if I have an NVIDIA Volta chip. Now they're expensive, they're $10K, but in principle, we would have failed if we can't realize this development effort, locally as well.
Locally with the GPU or only, or locally without GPU? So we have a lot of clusters here with Skylake processors but no GPUs. Yeah. So it depends on the app as to whether or not what I do with OpenMP, restructuring my algorithm, whatever, will work just as well or better on a non-GPU environment. But in many cases, you do find the refactoring redesign you do helps you on other architectures. We do have down at lower level portability exercises and assessments that we're executing. So we don't have a formal performance portability metric because that's a journey rather than a destination.
I believe, but we are checking for performance portability. And I would also say that for the systems beyond these first three movers, I think you will see more and more exascale class systems, okay? I don't think that these will be the only three. But that said, for us, success is we're tackling a problem that is only tractable on those systems. And we want to make sure your software, like you said, is useful on a much more pedestrian environment like a laptop.
So this is slightly pointed and slightly impolite question to ask.
Go ahead.
Could be fun for Friday. So how does the exascale computing effort stack up against like industry, right? So for a more narrow question, say running the software on the NVIDIA chip compared to the TPU chip developed by Google, how does that compare? Or how much are we doing compared to what Google and Amazon are doing in terms of running on heterogeneous computing system? They're doing really well. So
yeah. So are you're talking about the applications they develop, or are you talking about the end use?
The TPUs are the chips that Google developed particularly, but they're running on heterogeneous hardware. They are doing it already. They're taking users of different types of code and running on their hardware very easily, very smoothly. So how do we stack up against the industry, I guess that's
yeah, I mean, you know the AI machine learning area better than I would say we're behind there. And in many cases, TensorFlow is good enough for us. And that's not bad. I mean, where we can use TensorFlow, we will. As an example, on a lot of the machine learning activities now in the DOE are based on data parallelism, where I'm replicating the network, the neural net on every node, right? And I'm going to train every node trains on a little bit of the data. We sync up with the weights, so we can now train very fast because we're doing lots of training in parallel, and that's data parallelism. And that's a solved problem, frankly, right now. But and there have been DOE researchers like Prabhat, for example, at Berkeley that have done that. That's using kind of TensorFlow out of the box on a node, and wherever that could be useful, we should use it, and not claim that this needs to be reinvented or is not good enough. That said, just a general comment on industry, we have an industry council. I didn't mention that. That is part of ECP that we meet with face-to-face every 6 months and have detailed calls every 3 months. And these are developers and users of HPC and AI tools. Now, I'm not saying that keeps us totally on track and sort of honest, but they're a good sounding board for, is what we're doing useful and new and different and relevant for them? Because we don't want to be out doing things that are already solved. So I think that helps us, but it's always something we need to be aware of. I mean, I'm not saying we've solved that problem, but at the industry council, not a formal review body, but our advisory body that's saying, yeah, that stuff you're working on matters to us, or we've done that. And we have ISVs on the council as well, ANSYS and Altair, and so we don't want to compete with commercial codes. We want to make sure what we're doing can be ingested into their products where possible, or not go after something that they've solved. So we're trying to make sure that we're doing the right thing with the taxpayers' money. And
I could comment a little bit on PPPL experience on that. Certainly going to Google is a great idea. It's cheap, it's fast, you can get it. But what we found was that when we took our codes and tried to really run it at Google, they didn't have the software basis that we really need in order to make the codes perform optimally. So it turns out that the software technologies that Doug is referring to are actually quite
well, that's true. What I call the software stack is fairly unique. I mean, some of these have really found their way into a more standard stack, but fairly unique for DOE needs, the math libraries in particular. So some of that's a good point too. Some of the stack absolutely has to be there, and industry may not care about it as much as we would.
They are driven by their own motives, which are often very, very good. They, after all, gave us a lot of the computing technology that we are using now to good effect. It's always worth watching out for, but they're not tailoring to our needs. That's my experience, the little experience that I've had dealing with Google anyway. There's some people online, and I was instructed to be sure that I turn on a switch just so that they have an opportunity to
And I could just say too, that if you have other questions, comments, concerns, you can always ping me or talk to Amitabh. I'm happy to take this offline.
Anybody online who has a question? Any more questions for Doug? If not, thank you all for coming.
Thanks, appreciate your time. Thank you.